Hi, welcome to another episode of Resilience Reborn. My name is Trey Easley. I have a special guest here today. Happy to have him. His name is John Strock. He's here to help people out there that might be trying to recover or in recovery from alcoholism. He struggled with alcohol for many years, and he's here to talk about that. So we're happy to have you. Thanks for coming on, John.
Happy to be here, Trey. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, if you want to just kind of start kind of where you think your story begins, maybe when you started thinking you had a problem, or even before that, if there was anything. I know there's always some kind of a trigger or something that might happen, early on in life. So what kind of brought you here to be able to tell your story?
Yeah. I think a lot of our stories are similar. We're going to find kind of threads that go throughout. But for me, I grew up in a military family, which is wonderful. Great. We moved around all over the place, so it helped me kind of be able to get to know people quickly, things like that. I remember like my first drink was like we shared a 40 ounce like Budweiser between like three of us on a golf course in the middle of the night one time. But that was so I started drinking kind of early, but not heavily, not much, not often. Until like my senior year in high school, I started partying and hanging out. Still nothing crazy, but just we would go out and just have fun. Do bonfires, whatever, just high school stuff. And then I went into college. I went to a military college in Virginia, and there's no alcohol out there. There's nothing. You can't do anything there.
Oh wow.
So you find ways to get real creative about it. So.
Sure.
That's probably where I learned to get real sneaky about alcohol. Because you got to hide everything. You've got to cover it up, and you can't have anything laying around. So, kind of got into that sort of mindset. I think started there. Fast forward, through my 20s, I was always part of a kind of a really bingy crowd. My friends, we drink a lot. We go a couple of happy hours a week. Then we're always out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, just binging. That's rinse and repeat.
And I feel like that is a lot of people's beginning of, like, especially in their college years or 20s, but for some reason there's some of us that just keep on rolling, and some that just like, no, I'm too old for that. So it's just interesting. So and
it's funny because my friends were all drinking the same, right? I would still I caught myself starting to hide taking a shot or something around those guys when they're just doing it out in the open. So I'm starting to already kind of get in that mindset, something's happening. I don't realize it at the time, In my 20s also, I lived by myself for the first time in my life as an adult. And I got to the point where I'd stop going out, and I'd just isolate. And I still didn't realize that was the thing, But I would sit at home and I don't really feel like going out tonight. I'm just going to get a bottle of bourbon and sit here and I'll finish that bottle,
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of how it went, And I did that for a while, just kind of, not realizing it was a thing. I didn't really have people around me every day that were watching me and concerned about me, but I managed, to kind of get through that point. But I just kept in that binge cycle. And there were times kind of throughout there where I would be like, gosh, I think something's happening. I kind of start realizing a little bit, but I talked myself out of it. And I remember back in 2008, sitting up one night. I'm a hockey player too, so I played, men's league hockey late at night, get home, 1:30 in the morning. And in those days when I was, in my 20s and 30s, I would, we'd go out after the game, come home, drink some beers. And I remember sitting around one night, I'd been to my game, drank before the game, drank in the locker room after the game, drank at the bar after the game, came home, had a couple beers. And I'm sitting there like, God, what is happening? Because this is starting to catch up to me. And I that's the first time I Googled Alcoholics Anonymous,
Okay. And
so that's the first time I was, this was about 2008. So I was probably, why can't I do math? I was about 32.
Okay.
Something like that at the time. But still years went by after that, I did that a couple of nights where I was like, gosh,
it always takes a while after you first kind of start thinking about it,
Anyway, I kept going, and then it turned into hiding in line about it. I was with I've been with my wife now we've been together almost 18 or 20 years.
Okay.
Dating and stuff like that. So we were living together at that time, and that's kind of when I started hiding my drinking a little bit, not crazy, but I'd have a couple shots she didn't know about if we were going out before, and just stuff like that. Started doing that, started hiding stuff, started replacing bottles, things like that. It's kind of when I remember starting that, and that went on for a long time. And let's fast forward to where it got really bad was So my date, my last drink was on April 22nd of 2016, right?
Mm-hmm. Congratulations, buddy. That's amazing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm coming up on 9 years. Hopefully we'll get there.
That's right.
In about a month or so. But I got to the point where now I'm drinking all day, every day, and I'm waking up, and if I don't want to get too into the story, because but I would wake up, and if I didn't drink right away, I'd have the dry heaves, bloody nose, just shakes, crazy, right? This is getting toward the end, right?
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I'd wake up before my wife, and I wasn't sleeping well because I was, just
don't sleep when you drink.
I'd pass out, but then I'd wake up and I'd be like, whatever. So I kind of wait there, and my wife's next to me, and I'd have to get up early before her to either get something to drink or go get that, the dry heaves and all that out of my system and pretending I'm okay, right?
Yeah.
And I did that for a long time, and I've been hiding and lying about it. She would catch me, and I would lie and say no, and we had talked a little bit about. I think it's common now. If I've heard from in a couple of meetings I've been in where guys have been in that cycle, and there's someone around them seeing them do this, but they don't know that they're drinking like they are.
Yeah.
So my wife, thought I was having a stroke.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's what it is. Because it's better in my mind to be having a stroke than to be drunk, right?
Of course it is.
So I actually went to a neurologist with her, knowing that I didn't have a stroke, but I actually went through the whole process, went to the doctor, and, it was just crazy stuff like that. So
can we go back to, because I really want to know, because I don't know that I ever had the courage to Google anything about it. Like, I would go to the liquor store, and I don't know if you ever noticed it, but there's a poster behind the register, and it tells you all the things that can go wrong and with your body on the back of that wall.
I've never seen that.
Well, I noticed it one day, whenever it was, and ever since then, I'm like, I'm not looking at that poster, because I'm gonna start picking through and like, oh, I got that, I got that, and so that was just one of those things. It was like, okay, if I don't read it, it's not real, right? Mm-hmm. So when you finally got to that point, let's even go back kind of before that.
Yeah.
Like, so you were kind of noticing. First, you started isolating, which is one of the biggest signs.
Yeah.
That when because a lot of times we in the beginning and in our 20s, we go out, we hang out with our friends, having a good time, and then can go home and I would always go home and have a couple drinks, but I'd pass out, and then it would be fine. I wouldn't think about the next day, and then then you start putting the hair of the dog in your brain, right, and it gets obsessive. But I think it's very significant when you switch from that I'm having a good time with all my friends and going out to I'm just going to sit at home, because that was kind of part of my story was, I bought my first house when I was 18, and no one was there to watch me. So I could sit there and drink every single night, and I wasn't hurting a soul.
That's right.
In my mind, right?
Yeah.
So, and I didn't even realize it at that time. I thought it was just because of the way that I grew up and saw some of my family, they would come home and have a drink, or and it wasn't even my immediate family. It wasn't like my mom, my dad, their spouses, but I guess I don't know. It was just kind of the stigma around it. Like, you come home after a hard day or a good day, or it's sunny out, or it's cold and rainy, whatever it is.
Yeah. Always that.
So that isolation, I think, is huge. I'm glad you pointed that out. So when you actually Googled AA, was it just kind of as the curiosity? Were you actually thinking about going? Was it?
I mean, it's a good question. I think
it's hard to remember.
Yeah, back, no, I mean, I actually remember it really well. I remember where I was sitting, which is funny because I was hammered at the time.
Yeah.
It was, a long time ago. But so I was curious for sure. Obviously, some part of me knew something was happening. Some part of me knew that I had a problem, whether I was it got up to my brain or not to admit it.
Yep.
So obviously there was, I'd had concerns about myself somewhere, deep down, and a lot of it was curiosity. A lot of it was probably trying, can I do this and not have nobody know about it? Is there something else I can do that's I don't have to be in front of people? Can I still just do this on my own?
Yep.
and that's kind of what I did for a while. Even having done that, I didn't change my drinking at all. I just, I just still did that for a long time, and that was 2008, and I didn't stop drinking until I was 2016. So, a long time later. But I think it's also important to mention isolation too, because a lot of people, and at the time I had no idea that was a very common way for people to go when they're drinking too much and they don't want to be around people and they don't want to be told they're drinking too much.
Yep.
They don't want to be embarrassed by it. So that makes a lot of sense looking back that, I just was at that point and still I didn't realize it, right? I didn't know there was anything wrong with it because, I'm either drinking out or I'm drinking here, what's the difference, right?
What's the difference?
But there was a big difference,
Huge difference.
But I did that a lot, but yeah, I think that's an important thing. And when I just kept going and I got into this cycle of, like you said, hiding and lying about it. And for me, there's, this whole process has been also just a holistic mental health journey for me too. Cause there's other things that I've had going on that I never knew that were undiagnosed and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, essentially it's, alcoholism is a symptom, it's basically, there's always an underlying problem. We're just covering it up.
That's right.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it's, and I bring this up to a lot of people because there's always the stigma of alcoholics and addicts, which is fine because, you see it in the movies and all this stuff. But there's really nothing different between, someone who's overeating or someone who's a shopaholic or a sexaholic or whatever they use as their vice to cover up whatever else is going on. Right. Some people just go to alcohol and then, granted, there can be with certain people the violence and you see that obviously in the movies a lot. I never had any experience with that.
Yeah.
It was always kind of behind the scenes after everybody went to bed by myself, like you had said. But it's important to realize that it's just not people that drink and do drugs, and that there is something that they're trying to cover up, that they don't know what it is. But once you find out, it really helps, you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to say that too, because for whatever reason, alcohol gets almost the worst stigma than anything else.
It does.
It took me a long time to be open about it. About 5 years it took me to be open with it. And but yeah, I think that's important. People, you're not drinking like that for no reason, right? It's not just because it's hereditary or whatever you want to say it is. There's something that you're escaping from, or that you're like, trying to get back to, or there's something you're chasing or just trying to bury. And you're right. Until you're ready to find out what that is, then you're not ready to address your drinking or your drugs or your sex or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I think about when I had quit drinking, but I wasn't really open about it for a long time. With my friends, my close friends didn't know why. My wife and I were going through IVF at the time, so I'd say, "Oh yeah, we're just get healthy for this."
Yep.
And always some kind of excuse why I wasn't drinking. But I kind of had this realization, whether it's true or not. But for me, I felt like if you were a guy and you were at a bar and you weren't drinking, or at a party and you weren't drinking, people say, "Oh, is everything okay?"
Yeah.
Or is there, they automatically go alcoholic. And I feel like if you're a woman and you're not drinking, oh, you're pregnant.
Yeah.
It's kind of those two things. Yeah. So in my head, like, everybody, and if I'm not drinking, there's no other reason other than I'm an alcoholic. And I didn't want to face that with my people, right? For a while. So, social activities were super hard. I didn't want to get a new group of friends. My friends are my family. I didn't want to leave that behind and try to find a sober crowd to hang with. I didn't want anyone to change their behavior for me because of something that was going on inside of me.
Yep.
Which is unhealthy too. I still don't want people to change their behavior for me, but at the same time, I wasn't really saying, how much trouble I was in.
Yeah.
People never understood the depth of it, right? My wife did, and my parents did, and actually that's a good story too. What got me into my last day of drinking, and my first real AA meeting was I'd just been going on this path of just drinking, and I wasn't working for a while too, so that wasn't helpful. So and this happened more than once. My wife would come home and I'd be drunk off my ass and and denying it and whatever. And I remember this one time she came home and she knew I was drinking, and she was mad, and of course, and for some reason we let's go take a walk. We'll take the dog around the block. And I remember walking the dog around the block, and I had my shoes untied, hammered, stumbling around, and actually tripped, stumbled out of my shoes, fell on my knees, and here I am, like, oh my God,
Yep.
So my wife just over it, right? So I didn't know this at the time, but she had hidden my car keys, and she called my parents, who were living, about an hour and a half away, and said, "Hey, listen, you guys got to come up here." So it's a good thing she hid my keys, because when she told me they were coming, that's the first thing I went for. I was like, I'm out of here,
Of course.
So my parents came in. We had basically an intervention with my wife and my parents.
Yeah.
And we addressed it, and I, finally was able to say, yeah, that's what's happening. I was bawling.
Yeah. And tell me, because I had this experience, but how much was a relief to you that you could stop the lies and stop the insanity? Like, you actually had someone in your corner.
Yeah.
Because what I always tell people is alcoholism, especially, is a secret that if you don't tell, it'll kill you. If you do tell, you're risking losing a lot, if not everything.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's like, there's no good solution, except eventually you are going to be you'll be out of it, and it's not as nearly as bad as what you think.
Right.
Because the people that really are there to support you show up.
Yeah.
And the people that don't will go away.
Yeah.
And it's fine, because a lot of people, in my experience, are too close to the line. I don't know if you ever realized, but there's people I used to hang out with that were just a little too close to the line, and it's just not for them. Like, they and I get that. I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, tell me your feelings when you were, because I remember mine exactly. When you were tall, you were sitting there bawling, you were talking to your family. What kind of?
I mean, relief is certainly something that it came a little bit later in that event, but at first it was just like, I guess it was relief, because just letting go of that emotion, right?
Yeah.
And, just sitting there with people that cared and loved me, and, I have a really good relationship with my parents. They've always been wonderful. So, just having them come, just realized that I'd been affecting people that I love so much.
Yeah.
Just really hit me hard in that moment, because you don't think about that.
Yeah.
This is just me, man. No one, I'm getting drunk. What? It doesn't matter. Everybody else it's not their thing. I'm not hurting anybody, but you are, man.
You are.
I was killing my wife. I lost her trust because I lied about it all the time, and I was highly functional. I would, I could hide it, and it's unreal the amount of I was drinking every day.
I mean, if you were like me, you could drink easy a fifth, and no one would know.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And that's crazy, right?
It is.
But yeah, so we had that chat, and we I don't remember the whole conversation. I just remember more of the emotion and the feeling, and at the end I was like, God, it did feel good to be like, all right, people know, like, I've said it out loud. I didn't say I was an alcoholic at that point, but we had really addressed the big issue, and so the next morning I said, I'm going to go to AA, and I went, and I got in that room, and it's the first time I've ever raised my hand in that room.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a small meeting, and they were asking, giving out chips and stuff, and they said, who's 24 hours? And I look around, nobody's raising their hand, and I see this guy next to me, ended up being this guy named Shelbin, ended up getting to know pretty well. See his hand go up real slow. And I look at him, and I raise my hand real slow, and I said, how about 12 hours? And she said, that's great, come get your chip. So I got my chip. On the way home, I went to the liquor store, and I got a pint of vodka, and I drank it.
Sure.
And that's the last time I drank.
Okay.
April 22nd of 2016, after my first AA meeting.
Awesome. And I know there's people out there that, they and I tell, like, even when because I just recently spoke at the IOP, which is the intensive outpatient program right across at the hospital.
Yeah.
And when I was addressing them and talking to the graduates, and I said, no one is going to understand you. I said, as great as your therapist, and they were sitting right there, as your therapist and your doctors are, they will never understand you like another alcoholic.
Yeah.
Or your wife, or your kids even. Like, you have to rely on other people who have recovered and gotten sober, because unless you've been there, unless you've been to hell, you don't know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell people that it's very, and I've had doctors even talk, because I have doctors in some of my mastermind groups,
mm-hmm.
and they're just like, I will never be able to help people like you can. Right. And that feels good as someone who's recovered and and is actively trying to help others in their same situation. But it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah, and that thought kind of worked to my detriment because that's like, I can't talk to anybody. My wife doesn't understand this, But my wife knows me better than anybody. So she understands me.
Yeah.
So, but that didn't click till later, when she was like, and she's been through, big bouts of depression in her youth and throughout her life. And that's another thing that people don't talk about. But she kind of had that sort of stigma. So she had been through something similar. So we kind of were able to connect on that eventually. But you're right. It's hard to explain to somebody what it feels like. It's hard to explain to somebody what you do, what your thought process is, and how you feel. Yeah. Even when you're in early recovery, it's so hard to talk to people.
I just don't understand why you can't put it down.
Yeah, right.
Like, no, you're not going to.
I love my dad to pieces. When I struggled with anxiety and stuff too, and when I would have real bad anxiety, my dad would say, "Just think about something else." When I get anxious, I just think about something else. Well, I was like, Dad, you don't suffer from anxiety. You're just worried about something.
Yeah, right.
So just stuff like that. But people they don't understand all these things, and or you think they don't, at least. But it's true. Like the experience that you go through as an addict or an alcoholic is unlike anything else. It's you're facing like the worst of yourself, or what you think is the worst of yourself. You're seeing those things. You're hitting a bottom, and you're hitting, and hopefully you hit a bottom. Yeah, several bottoms. Yeah. And even though I had the way I was drinking was horrendous, I was destroying my body, and I didn't realize how dangerous it was. I did not go to a detox. I did not do any kind of outpatient treatment. I didn't tell my doctor. Ugh. I had no idea that all that stuff was so dangerous. Yeah, I was shake, sweating, puking, just like brutal, right? Yep. And real bad anxiety, just all of it. The only thing to take it away, I could take one sip, and the anxiety's gone. Yeah. And I know that, and it's right there. Yeah. So it's real hard to get through that part of it. But the thing that happened with me is, I was never open about it. I never told anybody why I wasn't drinking. Some people never knew I wasn't drinking. Until I hit my 5-year anniversary, and I was like, you know what? It's time to tell my story. So I actually went on Facebook and I posted for the first time, said, hey, listen, here's something that I've gone through. Today I'm 5 years past it. Here's where I was. Here's how I'm doing, kind of thing. And it's the first time I was ever public about it. Not even my friends didn't even know. Like, I told the world before I told my closest people besides my family. Yeah. And once I did that, it changed everything for me, because I went from shame to having like the shame of the stigma that I really just put on myself. It's such a mental thing, and but I had this huge stigma. But when I went and put it out there and put it in a way that let me help you, my stigma and my shame turned to pride. Yeah. So it went from something I was so ashamed of that I didn't want to talk about, that I wish was never there, to something that, hey man, I did this. It's 5 years that I've struggled. I mean, I was in a really bad place, man. Like I should have died, Right. Really, literally should have died. And here I am. So why should I be ashamed of that?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think it's per individual, but there's some people that will never talk about it, which is fine. Yeah. That's their thing. But it is. I know the feeling you're talking about, and I always say that shame can't exist when you wrap words around it. You know what I mean? You just can't. It can't exist in that space anymore, because you've wrapped words around it. You've gotten it right in your head, and then everybody knows what are you going to do? Take it back? You're not going to unring the bell. Yeah.
And no one's going to be like,
oh my God,
I can't believe that's disgusting. No one's going to care. No. Everybody's going to be so proud of you,
because I can guarantee you 90% of people have something that someone they know or someone in their family that's struggling. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked about my story to people, and they're like, yeah, my brother's dying. He won't stop. Or my dad died, or my uncle, he passed away.
Yeah. Everybody's touched by it somehow.
Everybody. And it's we've got friends now where they're kind of right into the middle of the nasty part. And it's hard to help the people that are in the middle of someone who's fully in their alcoholism or addiction, because most times you can't do anything until they hit their own bottom.
That's right.
I mean, you can talk to them blue in the face. I remember my wife telling me, I think you need to stop drinking or slow your drinking down. The words I heard come out of her mouth was, I need to hide it better. That's exactly what I heard,
Mhm.
right? And so I did. And I think I'm glad you brought that up too earlier, that you know where you kind of found you started hiding it and getting good at that, because I'll tell you, for especially for families that are listening, we're very good at hiding at extremely well. And I even would hide it from myself and couldn't find it.
Been there too, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, even after I got sober, I remember this basement of our house flooded, and I walked downstairs, and I was about a year sober, and I looked down and I see 6 inches of water all over the basement, and I'm like, and I thought to myself, I said, would a drink make this better? And I'm like, hell no, right? So I told Angie, I was like, I'm gonna go get the shop vac. So I go up, get the shop vac. Of course, you got to empty the dust, take the filter out for water. And I open it up, and there's a big old ABC bag full of minis in there, because we're, for whatever reason, at least for me, minis were my go-to. Easy to get rid of,
pop it real quick.
Yeah. So big old bag full of minis, completely full. And I tied it off. I didn't even think about it. I tied it off. I threw it in the garbage, which it was a Friday, and the garbage didn't go out till Tuesday. And I didn't once think about that bag in that trash can. And that's the best feeling in the world, going from an obsession to where I couldn't pass a liquor store without stopping. And if I did pass a liquor store, it's because there was one a couple miles down the road I knew about.
Yeah.
To go from that to being able to pick it up, toss it in the trash, and never having a thought about it is the most amazing feeling in the world.
Yeah. And
I wish everybody could have that feeling, but the truth and reality is there's just so many deaths and so many things because people just can't find a way to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And I think, you and I have a similar thing in our story, where you've had someone there to support you. You've been with your wife for 18?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, we've been married for almost 14.
Okay, so we've been married. I better think about this, because if I get it wrong,
we'll cut that part out.
Yeah, but so 15 years, and I wouldn't, if it wasn't for my wife, obviously in the very beginning, she was like on the cusp of moving on. Mm-hmm. Especially when I went to get help and was away for 45 days. But she stuck with it, and she saw it through. And I think it's so important to have that support in your life, because I feel like if my family would have left, I'd have probably been dead. Right?
Sure. 100%.
There was just, so that support is huge. Now, I will say that I feel like there is a certain point, especially if there's like abusive or just any of that stuff, or putting your kids in a spot where they shouldn't be, mm-hmm. that you just have to leave, and that might be their bottom.
Yeah.
But but I was able to, she was able to stick with me, and that's ultimately what got me through. Mm-hmm. Was that support, and I think it's huge, and support from your close friends and family too, if you're willing to share that. Mm-hmm. I think I did share it with my closest friends, and some of the friends I would hang out with all the time, I haven't really talked to since, mm-hmm. Because for whatever reason, and I don't question that, because I get it. It's like you all you can do is clean your side of the street, they say, right?
Yeah.
And but what's funny is the ones who really came up and were the most supportive were my old drinking buddies from back in my 20s.
That's wild.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm still to this day, I remember my wife wouldn't let me sleep here one night, and I went to my buddy's house, and I woke up the next morning. He went to work, and I went downstairs, and I was just like, I need a drink. He put a lock around the refrigerator doors where the beer cooler was, and he took all the liquor bottles out of the liquor cabinet.
Wow.
Before he left. And I was like, son of a bitch.
How could he do that to you?
Yeah. But he knew, right? And this was while I was still active. Mm. So little things like that, it go a long way in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I mean, I would have been toast. Mm-hmm. I went to AA for like the first 5 years, and the only reason I stopped going was really COVID. Like, I just kind of broke that cycle, and just did other things with my recovery. But But when I would go, I would just wonder the same thing. Like, there's guys in there that are homeless. There's guys in there that men and women who, are single, have no kids, or whose kids and family won't talk to them anymore. And they're still sober and they're still not drinking. And I'm just like, how do you do that? Like, I don't know how I would have done it had I not had the support that I had. I just think I wouldn't have cared enough. And just would have been over,
Yeah.
So it's such a huge thing. I think it's easy for people to run, and I don't blame people for running.
Yeah.
But where they say don't leave before the miracle, right? Like, don't leave before the miracle happens, the people that have stayed in our lives get to see us now, and we're never perfect, but I think we're better versions of what we were.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's a wild thing. And like I said, everybody is so supportive once you talk about it. Just like everything else, IVF, depression, anything that you go through, people just keep it so tight. But once you open up, you realize that so many people out there deal with the same stuff.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it just takes like one person to say, hey, and not that everyone's going to come on Facebook and talk about it, but they're going to message you. Yeah. And you might grab a coffee with them, but
I mean, that's kind of how we met.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, really.
Similar stories, and we were connected that way. And, it's like we go back 10 years being able to talk about it because we know exactly where we were.
It's like instant fellowship.
Yeah. So it is. And I want to go back real quick. You said, okay, so you went to your AA meeting, you came out, and you took a drink to obviously calm down the nerves and the anxiety or whatever.
Yeah, withdrawal, everything, all of it.
Yeah. And I remember my first appointment with the gastro guy, which was looking at my liver stuff, right? And when he had told me that, I had a form of cirrhosis and things, first thing I did was go to the car and take 3 drinks of, I took 3 shots of Fireball in my car. Yeah. And people were like, what? I'm like, that's the truth. I mean, that's just the way it is with, especially when you're heavily into it and you're especially towards the end, like you're just doing anything you can. And I did have the similar, I would sleep as long as I could and stay in bed because my wife was already gone. Yeah. Because I knew as soon as I got up, I would have to take a drink just to stop the shaking. Yeah. The dry heaves. People think I'm crazy, but like in between dry heaves, if I wanted to stop the dry heaves, I would have to take a couple shots.
It's instant.
And it instantaneously
unfortunately
stop, right? Yeah. But all it's doing is prolonging everything and making things worse. So, and it's unbelievable. And people hear these stories. Now, the people that are going through it or have been through it, they're going to understand, yep. But the people, like especially the families that are listening, they're just going to think, I can't believe that, or my spouse or whoever, my mom, my dad, they're not that bad, but they look like they're drinking a little heavy. Well, you don't know what they're drinking behind the scenes. And that's where, like, I would come and I would have, I'd play it and, sure, I'll have a drink, right? But I'd already had probably, 8, 10 before that. And I've got the bottle downstairs when everybody goes to bed. So I'll play like I'm going to have a drink or two. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I would drink when my wife would be at work. And then when she'd come home, I made sure, like, I'll be cooking dinner and I'll have an open beer. Yep. So if she smells anything, it's this, I'll just open this one. Like that kind of stuff. Yes. And you're, going back to what you said about like how. And alcoholics don't really drink beer.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It
doesn't matter. I would drink anything. It did not matter.
But it's not like a drink of choice because it's going to fill you up before you can really feel it, especially if you're like further on. Mm-hmm. That's true. The beer is just kind of a
get
front.
You through. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's such a crazy thing to go through. And one of the things that's sort of been like a thing throughout my life that I really started noticing throughout my alcoholism and my recovery was I had this sort of feeling of like being othered. I didn't feel like everybody else, right? And I could never describe that. I could never like pinpoint why. And I kind of felt that like throughout my life. And then when I stopped drinking, then I had that sort of like other feeling now with the stigma that I've attached to it. And so it made me, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to do anything. Yep. And so it wasn't until, I could realize that I'm losing my train of thought here, like we talked about, but it wasn't until I kind of figured out what that was. And what when I mentioned earlier that I kind of went through like this whole mental health journey throughout
Yeah.
my recovery and my end of my alcoholism. And, you know, I've in the last 18 months diagnosed with ADHD, depression, anxiety has been a thing my whole life.
Sure.
And I realized that the anxiety and the ADHD kind of removed me from, like, had a barrier between me and other people
Yeah.
that I didn't know was there because I didn't know what those things were.
Right.
Couldn't name what that was. But now that I kind of understand everything that's happened, like mentally, I've been in therapy, you know, since I don't know, for the last couple of years. And it's helped me understand why I felt that way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because of anything that I was doing, it's because of something that I had that I didn't realize.
Sure.
You know, so going through this recovery process has made me really look at mental health in a different way too.
Yep.
It all kind of fits together. And I think knowing if you have ADHD that you're more likely to become an alcoholic or an addict, you know, you're more impulsive. Things like that. Not that would have stopped me if I'd known that, but it's kind of like it helps you sort of justify your behavior in some ways, which is sort of an ego thing, and it helps you understand why you act certain ways and why you do certain things, and why you have a proclivity to certain things. You know?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's such a good point because, number one, you know, once you stop drinking or drugging, you start to feel your feelings. And you're not used to it, right? You're not used to it. And so yeah, all those feelings are to come rushing in. You're not going to know what to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting to feel your feelings.
Yeah.
And those things do crop up because I know for sure that I have, you know, at least a touch of ADHD. You know, I can see it, you know, in myself and I had some stuff, you know, I kind of go back to, you know, when my mom passed away, she was killed in a car accident when I was 15. And that's when I realized I'd really started, you know, using alcohol to cover that up.
Yeah.
So there's always something that the reason that you're covering these things up, you know, I believe, and it's really getting to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you had said you let's go back to where you said how dangerous it was, right? That you stopped.
Uh-huh.
And I want to touch on this because just to let everybody know, right? So when it comes to a lot of drugs, if not most or all drugs, you can I think like pain pills and things are a little different. You don't want to just take them cold turkey, stop them cold turkey, but even some of the heavier drugs you can stop and it's okay. You're going to go through your withdrawals and stuff. But with alcohol, even my doctor told me, he said, do not stop cold turkey. He's like, you can go into shock. You could stroke out, right? Your body will shut down. And, you know, which is the DTs, which is the shaking and the sweats and the, you know, that stuff. And so he told me to have all my drinks for the first day, then have that the next day, and then have that the next day.
Yep.
And, well, having all my drinks, I mean, I was still hitting I was like, okay, so I can have 10 tonight.
Yeah,
you know?
I'll cut back a little bit.
Right. And I made it all the way down to, I think, the day that I was having. Now, of course, our drinks, at least mine, were always like 90% alcohol.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, you put a little something on top of it just so people see you putting something on top of it, right? So my drinks were 90-10s, you know, and I was still consuming a tremendous amount of alcohol, even when I was weaning down.
Yeah.
But I still only made it to probably the 4 big red cups of a day. And I was like, well, what's one more? I'll just have it tomorrow, right? And then the cycle started
Always
again.
tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, the cycle started again. So it's so hard to stop. And it really, if you do, it really needs to be, especially if you are feeling those DTs. Like you do have those withdrawal symptoms, like we were talking about with the dry heaves and the shaking and stuff. You have most likely crossed that line that you need a little bit more help. Yeah, yeah. You know,
and it's I'm so glad you brought it back up too, because it's such an important thing that people don't know. I don't think it's the only withdrawal you can die from, but it's certainly the most likely that you
most
die
likely,
from,
yeah.
which people don't know. Like they think, of course, people go to heroin and things like that, but alcohol is the one that will kill you.
Yep.
You know, and it kills more people in the United States than I think any other drug.
Oh yeah.
It's a wild, scary thing, and I didn't realize how dangerous that was until I got into therapy, and my therapist was like, you kidding me? It's like, you should not be here. Like I
Right.
just went straight cold turkey. And I did a few times, you know, I wasn't the first time I stopped.
Yeah.
But when I did, it was straight cold turkey. And it's, I suffered through it. You know, it's, I never want to go back to that feeling of the shakes and the sweats. And
Yes.
I mean, God, it's the worst thing in the world, you know, but, it's important to remember that stuff, you know, it's important to sort of tell your story to yourself. And, you know, a lot of people say, if you're thinking about drinking, you know, just play that tape forward. What happens if I don't drink? Okay. If I take that one drink, what happens after that?
Yeah.
Either I failed in my sobriety and I start over, or I have a second drink and a third drink. And I've already had one, so why not have 5 more?
Right.
You know, so it gets tricky like that.
And it's, you know, and that's kind of and that was what I wanted to go back to earlier was, when your therapist kind of was telling you these things and you're like, oh, if I would have known that, at least it kind of explains some stuff. Right. Well, what kind of turned me over was something similar, but it was, you know, when I had went away, I went to rehab for 45 days and voluntary, you know, and it was the best thing I ever did. And matter of fact, the reason it was 45 is because I extended twice because I wanted to make sure that I was good.
Good for you.
And but I remember because I didn't want anything to do with AA, and I did some paid stuff that helped me for a little while, but I went back because I didn't continue it. You know, as far as stopping my own, I mean, I might have tried, but it just wasn't going to work. Yeah. It wasn't. You know, you always tell yourself that, right? You always tell yourself, well, okay, I can do this. You know, after. You know, St. Patty's Day is coming up. So after St. Patty's Day, but there's always a drinking holiday coming up, no matter what, right? So you tell yourself. But I was sitting in rehab. It was like the 3rd day, and the AA group would always meet after all the classes, and they would always ask, "Hey, Trey, you want to come sit down?" I'm like, nah, I don't want anything to do with that, man. And I said, "Okay." So like 3rd day, I was just bored, and I went and sat down, and they had. I think the reason I went is like because they went through the whole book and they were at the very end and they're like, we're starting over at the beginning. This guy was very thorough. We went from the very first page to the very first lines of what an alcoholic is and what, you know, the definition of alcoholism and all this stuff and the obsession of the mind, right? And then we read the first 7 pages that day of the doctor's opinion, right? I mean, this book was written in 1936, something like that, right?
Old, yeah.
So but those first 7 pages made me realize that, okay, I'm not just an F up, right?
Yeah.
There's something different about me and the makeup of my body. There's a reason I could outdrink most of my friends and still look like everything's going fine, right? And it kind of explained a lot of stuff, and I was like, okay, I can live with that. I can live with that. I'm not just some drunk, you know, some loser, because that's never the case. There's always something there. So once I read that, so what I did was, after I read that, I was like, man, this helped me. So I would watch people at night come in from, they'd come in and go to detox. You know, their families would bring them in or whatever. So the next day when they got kind of sobered up a little bit, I'd go in there and I'd say, hey, you know, come with me. I want to read you something real quick. And every day I would read these guys, whoever would come with me, those first 7 pages, hoping that it would change their life.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize was, and this was pointed out to me later, was I was actually helping myself at the same time, right? Because as you get yourself out of your own head to help someone else is when you really start that recovery process, I feel like.
For sure. Yeah. And it's cool that you say that too, because you didn't get here by yourself, right?
Yeah.
And those guys didn't get there, but wherever they are now,
like
you were part of that recovery.
Yeah.
And that does feel good.
Yeah.
It feels good. And it helps you to reiterate that stuff with other people and to share that with someone for the first time is pretty cool, you know? Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I did AA for, like I said, like 5 years. But I'll be frank, I was never I never worked the steps. I never had a sponsor. But I went to those rooms a couple times a week for 5 years to be around people like me.
Yeah,
and I still got so much out of that. It was a layer of accountability. I didn't have to go back to that group and say, "Hey, listen, I fucked up. Excuse my
Sure.
language. I didn't want to go back into that. So that was another layer of accountability, and it was powerful walking up the steps to that meeting, and just walking in there and just being around, like you said, being around people like you.
Yeah.
And you realize they're also just like people that aren't alcoholics.
Yes.
We're all
yeah.
and there's doctors, there's homeless people, there's everything in there. You know, so it's an interesting place, and it's one where I would always recommend people give it a shot. Because whether they do the full thing or not, and I feel sort of like maybe I still will do the 12. Maybe I'll still work it, but I sort of feel like I should have done that, but at the same time, I'm in a good place in my recovery, and AA is a part of my story.
Right.
That's very important to me, and I still keep in touch with people and things like that. And it was for me, no one else in my life was getting sober. And I was with all these partiers, and I was like, how am I the only one?
Yeah.
I found out that one of my really good friends, I have two good buddies that have one that's maybe a year ahead of me, lives on the West Coast, and I know him really well, but he just lives far away, right? But we talk, and then another of my friends came about, in the middle of COVID, he called me out of nowhere. I don't really talk to him much. He had moved away to Richmond. And he was like, man, I got to stop drinking. He's like, what, do you mind if I ask you about it?
Yep.
And I talked to him, and now he's 4 or 5 years sober,
Yeah.
And so the three of us are on a text together, and we just talk and check in. And
Yeah.
so I don't have anybody that's immediate, like right here, which is, it's unfortunate, but I'm sure I can find something like that. But at least I have some sort of network,
Yes.
And then the other kind of cool thing is when I was in the middle of my drinking, I was, far from even thinking about quitting. I was flying somewhere for work. I was flying to California, and I had a layover in Denver for like 5 hours. So for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm at the airport for 5 hours. I'm going on a work trip. I don't have to do anything when I get there.
Yep.
So what am I going to do for 5 hours? I'm going to the bar.
That's right.
I went to that bar, and I sat there. The bartender's name was Meatloaf. It was crazy. It was fun. I sat next to this guy named Tate for like 5 hours drinking. He was coming back from Vegas from a bachelor party. I'm going out, we're just sitting there for hours drinking. We start talking, we're, hanging out. We start talking about music. He's like, turns me on to one of his friends' bands, who I ended up going to see in DC like the next week. And we just connected over that, right? We stayed friends just from being drunk together. We just stayed friends and connected on Facebook, whatever. And then as I'm like in the throes of like the end of my, right before I started my recovery, I start seeing him posting. He'd come out of a coma. He was in a coma for 3 days from benzos and alcohol. He almost died. His wife and kids have left him.
Yep.
And now he's on the sober track. And I was kind of watching him. I was like, oh my God, this guy almost died.
Yeah.
I would drink with this guy for 4 hours. We're the same.
Yep.
And I was like, God. And so that's when I was one of the first people I kind of latched onto. And I started reaching out to Tate. And no shit, like to this day, and it's been, in my sobriety almost 9 years, every single morning, the first thing I get on my phone is a text from Tate. Every single morning. I've met the guy one time in person.
That's awesome.
I've talked to him once on the phone, but every single day I get this note from Tate, who lives in Wisconsin. And it's always the way I start my day, and it's all about gratitude. The whole thing's about gratitude. It's just really cool to have seen us where we were there, and now to have like he helped me get here because he was in such a bad place,
Right.
and I saw myself in him, and I didn't want to end up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's powerful.
Yeah.
And it's funny how these things just kind of they pop up, that's very powerful. I think that, and I know people that they go to AA and they're not even drinkers.
Yeah.
They go there because they like the way it makes them a better person.
Yeah.
In life in general, period.
Yeah.
So yeah, I highly recommend it to people, especially in early recovery, just because you have to have that support group.
Same.
You get those phone numbers when you go in there and you call, you talk, you have to, because and I like I even told those graduates, I said if cravings come, they come for like 10 minutes. You can get through it. Call somebody, get your mind off of it. Someone who's been through it, who's not in early recovery but has at least a year or two under their belt, they're going to help you get through that craving.
Yeah.
So it's important to have that support group, because otherwise you're just white knuckling, trying to get through it on your own, and you're one stressful day away from possibly picking up that drink.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah, the network is so important. And the cool thing about it is you don't have to know a person
No.
very well to connect really quickly around recovery.
Yep.
Or around helping someone out of recovery or whatever it is. It's like you're like, oh my God, we're the same. Even if we're not, we are,
Yeah.
in that way. And if you share that one thing that's so big in your life, it's like an instant, like, we're here because of this,
Yeah.
like I haven't met you in person before,
Yeah.
But I've respected you and I've known who you are. And I was excited to come here today. So it's just really cool to sit here and talk to someone that you almost hardly know, but I could sit here all day and talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just one thing I wanted to say, because you mentioned something that I think people struggle with, especially in early sobrieties. They don't want to go out because they don't want to have to explain away why they're not drinking.
Yeah.
And in my experience, most people don't even give a shit, to tell you the truth. They're worried about their problems and them having drinks, and you'll get asked, "Hey, you need something to drink?" No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Or I'd always carry like some kind of clear drink, like a soda or Sprite or something. And I would do that to kind of hide the fact that I wasn't drinking.
Yeah, same.
But then I was like, that's, like you said, that's stupid. I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And now if anybody asks me about me not drinking, I explain it like this. I said, if you had a table, this super long table that had all the alcohol that you would drink in your life on it, I got to the end of my table a lot faster than everybody else. That's all. I've already got to the end of my table.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
So, and they're like, oh, I've never really thought about it like that. Like, yeah.
I packed all my drinking into here. Yeah.
That's right.
You can spread it over.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and I would recommend AA to anyone beginning too. It's just an instant network. I just think it's all a cool thing.
Yeah. So now, because in my house, it's a wide open conversation. My daughters, they know all about it. We use it as kind of, you can get through anything. I keep it like that as far as, even at your lowest.
Yeah.
And they know that. And they still, I'm 4.5 years sober. They still, I think my daughter just asked me the other day, she's like, what are you doing out in the garage so long? Right? Because that's where I used to go.
Yeah.
And, I used to get kind of, snippy about that. But listen, like you said, it took years and years of losing their trust.
Yeah.
And to gain it back takes years and years.
Yeah, it does.
And there's always going to be a question. There's always going to be a question in someone's mind, and that's out of support and love.
Yeah.
It really is. It's not that they're trying to catch you, because they don't want to catch you. And then it's all over. It's starting all over again.
Yeah.
They just want to make sure you're all right. So,
yeah, that's true.
And I know you have a couple kids, a couple boys, right?
Yeah, two young boys. I got sober when I was 40 years old, right? And that was 2016, and then we had our first son in 2018.
Okay.
So my kids never saw any of it.
Yep.
They still see the bad parts of me. I'm still like the same person, but they will never, hopefully will never see me drunk.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm really equipped because of what I've been through to sort of teach them, just to make them aware of what can happen and what, just to be careful and to not just about themselves, but look, pay attention to your friends,
Yep.
This disease takes people in all kinds of ways. Suicide too, it's a lot of people die from suicide. And fortunately, I was never suicidal in this thing, but but at the same time, I didn't care if I died, or I thought my wife would be better off if I died.
Right.
But I wasn't going to do it myself. But if walking and that tree branch falls on me, that's probably a good thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? I had that sort of mindset for a long time. But
it's definitely it's a bad mindset to be in, but the reward you get when you're out of it, and especially when you can start to help other people, or like your family, like you said, you think you're just hurting yourself. I thought I was just hurting myself, but in turn you're killing your family. Because they're all talking. They eventually they're going to know, because as alcoholics we can hide it pretty well, but sometimes you overshoot the mark.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and you get into that slur and you're like, damn,
Yeah.
you know, and then they catch you and then they know. And, you know, it's such a bad cycle.
Mm-hmm. And it is a cycle, you know,
It is.
especially if you're chasing something like anxiety and, you know, like if I'm not drinking, if like, first of all, like a lot of my anxiety did not get better because of my drinking. It got so much worse.
Yeah.
It just felt better for a little while, but it's just compounding, you know?
Mhm.
So when it come back, it would be just times 100, you know? It was pretty wild. But I like to go back also, like what you were saying about being out and, you know, having a drink in your hand or whatever. This disease, or, you know, maybe it's just the way I'm wired, and like a lot of us are, but it makes you a selfish person. Like, and I never would have thought I was selfish. I never would have thought like anyone would think I was selfish. But then at the same time, I sure think about myself a lot when I'm out. I'm like, gosh, these people everybody in here is wondering why I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
Everybody in here thinks I'm an alcoholic.
Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, nobody fucking knows I'm there.
Yeah.
And if they do, they don't
cares.
care.
They don't care about
You know, it's wild. It's just wild what you do to yourself. So it's so funny.
And to be honest with you, you have to have that selfish trait in my mind if you're going to get sober.
Yeah, for
Because, you know, and this was in earlier recovery for me, especially when I got back. I remember my wife sitting there looking at me one day, and we're sitting there talking, and she's like, I'm not happy. She's like, you're like a roommate. And I had to have a conversation with her that I have to focus on me right now.
Yeah.
Because if I don't focus on me, if I don't focus on my meetings, if I don't focus on being sober, then I might as well be dead anyway. And I won't be around. And then where we're going to be, you know? So and you have to be selfish in the beginning and be able to hopefully try and explain that to the person that you're with, because they'll see a bit of a change, especially when you start, like if you're heavy in I did 90 and 90, you know, 90 meetings, 90 days. And you're going to latch on to those people because they understand you. You can tell stories in that room that, you know, normal people will think you're out of your freaking mind. And everybody's like, yeah, and
yeah.
you know, I always say that if everybody in AA put their problems on a table, you'd want yours back most likely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
you know?
you hear a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Come really grateful. Yeah.
But that selfish part is you have to focus on yourself.
Yeah, it's survival.
And I think family members also have to understand that you just need to be there if you're serious about helping whoever's in your life who's trying to get sober, because it is hard to be there, but understand that they've got a long journey.
Yeah, there's work to be done.
There's some work to be done for sure.
Yeah, and this is another cool topic too, because I think, you know, especially when you're in it, like I didn't want anybody to know. Like I said, you know, I was so ashamed. I didn't want anybody. And so when my wife, you know, when we talked about it, I said, look, I don't want you to talk to anybody about it. I just want, you know, let me just deal with it. We'll get past it. And I don't want anyone else to know why. And so I shut her down from talking to other people.
Right.
So I made it so that she could not release what she had.
Yes.
You know, because she needed to talk to someone besides me.
Yes, she absolutely does.
You know, and I didn't, not that if she did, I wouldn't have been angry, but I asked her not to for me.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I was putting her in a really bad spot because now she's got this, and now she's got my secret. I don't have my secret anymore.
Yeah.
I gave it to her,
good point.
you know, and I didn't let her share that, you know, and that, looking back, that's one of the worst things I did in my recovery was to shut her down, because I'm the one going through this, you know, you just, you know, be here. Meanwhile, they're all going, anybody in your house, anybody that's around you, that's close to you is going through it too.
Absolutely.
You know? I think that's real important. I think it's also important, like, you know, if I come across a buddy of mine who needs help, my wife's always like, hey, listen, if his wife needs to talk to somebody that's kind of been through this from the recovery side, but not in recovery, you know, I'm happy to talk to her too. And I think that's a really cool way to outreach too. This is something, another piece that people don't focus on is the people that are close to you, you know, and that's why, like, what's the sort of like AA, but it's for people who
Al-Anon,
yes.
And there's Alateen.
Yes, Alateen. Yeah. So for people who are dealing with alcoholics in their lives, can, you know, go to Al-Anon, Alateen to sort of be in that community, which is really cool too. Which is
it is, and I think it's helpful for my wife would never go.
I
begged her to go.
Yeah.
I even had her read the section in the book to the wives, and all she did was bawl. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted her to go, and everybody always suggested her go, but she didn't want to.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to try and force her to do it. But I know it's helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
You will find out in there that there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
They kind of help you work on yourself and maybe, keep them on some sort of path. But if you think you're going to go in there so you can make them stop drinking, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. That's I've found, and I always think and see that, no one's going to recover until they're ready to recover.
Yep. And they're
it's not going to be like this revelation. It's not going to be like they're all of a sudden have clarity, but something's going to happen, or maybe they will have clarity. Maybe I'm sure that has happened to people. It didn't happen to me. I had to have someone else step in.
Definitely not common.
Yeah. So, but I think you've got to have that, and then once it's out, it's so liberating. You think like, before you start talking about it, it's like, oh my God, what are people going to think? No one's going to want to be around me. Blah blah blah. But then you do it, and it's liberating, and people cheer for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or people say, hey man, like you said, my dad or my brother or my somebody else in their life needs help.
Yeah.
I think
you're the first person they think of.
Yeah. It's true. And we didn't really have anybody to go to when I was going through it, but my parents live in this little town called Hustle, Virginia, out in Essex County, and there's a guy there that they knew who had been in recovery for a long time. And they said, you got to call this guy. And my parents said, do you mind if our son calls you? And he said, yeah, I'm happy to do that for you guys, but also, I don't want my identity to be the addict or the recovery guy. Mm-hmm. So, I'm happy to help, but I don't want that to be my entire identity. Sure. Which I thought was cool, And I called him, and he was great. I didn't really know him very well, but he helped me through that first couple days. You know? And the numbers I got at my first AA meeting, people were calling me. I gave my number out, and they called me.
Yeah. Pretty cool. I think that's huge. Most people don't give their number out, but you're not going to call. Most likely, you're not going to call anybody in that list.
Yeah.
Or if you do, it's going to be after you drink, which is the wrong way to do it, but it just seems to be the way it happens. So if you give your number out, you're kind of, you're locked into people calling you.
Yeah,
and I think that's huge. That's a good idea.
I also love what you were talking about with just how it affects family and all that. And where's my train of thought here? It'll come back.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about. But yeah, I mean, there's just thinking about selfish shit. Like when at a period of time where I wasn't working and I was drinking, I would be bored, and I just, I'm just gonna go for a drive.
Yep.
I get in the car and go for a drive. Going nowhere.
Yeah.
Just driving, drunk.
Yep.
Yeah. And I was very fortunate, and the people around me were very fortunate that nothing ever happened in that way. But I mean, if I had gotten pulled over every time, I'd have like 100 DUIs.
Sure. Oh yeah. I always say, man, I probably could have wiped my family out several times.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, it didn't happen. But unfortunately, that I actually did that. And there's nothing you do to change any of that except going forward. And I think people have to realize that too. Is everything you've done up until this point, you have to own, and you have to move forward with it, and really focus on how you're going to recover from it versus really thinking and worrying about the past too much.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to help. Yeah. It's not going to help to do that.
That's true. Yeah. I think the way the past is helpful is like keeping it green. Like you say, like, just remembering what it was like, but then move on.
Move on. Yeah.
Let's go forward. Yeah. I like that.
Well, John, I really appreciate you coming out, man. It's been a great conversation. I know we could probably sit here for hours.
Definitely could,
But it's, this was extremely powerful. I think it's super helpful for people out there, for people who are early in recovery, not even in recovery, and definitely the families. Mm-hmm. So we really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, man, it's been a pleasure. When you asked me to come on, I was like, hell yeah. I was really stoked to talk to you. And I just love what you guys are doing, man. Anything that's out there that makes people, one, realize they're not alone. Yeah. Two, realize that there is something after all this. No matter how bad it is, there's something after it. Something better. So I love that you guys are sharing that message. And one thing I would like to do, and I've mentioned this to you a while back, but I would like to create some sort of group within our industry, because I think our industry, real estate, is a place where it's certainly a lot of drinking around. Yeah. It's easy to there's all these events, and you can do whatever you want.
Free alcohol. That's what got me. That's kind of what put me over the line.
Yeah.
Right when I was doing electric work, I had to get up at 4 a.m. I had to go work in a hot panel, or electricity is not good when you're shaking.
Yeah.
So, but it was, I don't have a boss anymore, and I don't I can go out and play golf and drink during the middle of the
Yeah.
day. And, all those things, they add up until you finally cross that invisible line that most people don't know about. There is an invisible line you cross that you can't go back.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And this industry is tough. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, so whatever that looks like, but I'll definitely keep you posted. But I think there's just anytime you can get people together that have a common issue that are doing the same sort of stuff, like it's always good. So
absolutely,
but yeah. I appreciate you so much, Trey. And congrats on your 4.5 years.
Appreciate it.
Amazing, and your story's incredible. And
Thanks.
I'm glad you're still here.
Awesome, buddy. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Resilience Reborn, and we'll see you next time.